They rolled him in at dawn, under a sky that was the color of iron. The convoy came down the mountain road, with lights flashing. Big black vans moved slowly and quietly. Men in dark uniforms stood at attention like trees. The gates of ADX Florence opened with a metallic cry. The arrival of a new inmate was supposed to be routine. The prison was used to handling dangerous people. But this time the air seemed thicker, and the whole place held its breath. Inside the van, the man sat very still. He had a hood over his head, and his hands were cuffed in front and behind. He smelled of cold and the long travel. The officers spoke in low voices and walked like they were on ice. Cameras watched. The alarms were soft and steady. This was the highest moment, the most shocking part of the story, because ADX Florence is the prison designed to hold people the world fears most. It is called a Supermax. It is built so no one can slip away. It is made for control, for silence, and for keeping people far away from everyone else. When a new prisoner came, everything changed for a little while. The warden ordered extra checks. The towers watched the convoy come. Guards closed shutters and locked doors. It was a point where the outside world met the inside world, and the meeting always felt like thunder. What happened next was not loud like in the movies. It was quiet and exact. The van stopped. A man with an official badge opened the back doors. The prisoner was led down a metal ramp. 2 officers walked beside him, and 2 walked a little behind. The prisoner moved in small steps, his head bowed. The metal of the gate bit the light. The doors closed. The prisoner was inside ADX Florence now, behind walls that rose like cliffs and barbed wire that shone. He would eat from a tray that slid through a tiny opening. He would see the sky through the top of a narrow slit. He would hear only occasional footsteps. This was the place where people are kept apart, so they cannot harm others. People call ADX Florence the Alcatraz of the Rockies. That name tells you a lot. The prison is far from cities. It is high up where the air is thin. The guards call it ADX. The inmates call it the box sometimes. The reason is simple. The building was made to hold some of the most dangerous criminals in America. People with led gangs, made plans to hurt others, or tried to escape other prisons. ADX keeps them where they cannot touch anyone. The design works like this. Each person has a small cell, like a tiny room. The door is thick metal. The window is a little square. The bed is bolted to the wall. The toilet is small and private. The light is usually on in the cell, so the inmate can be seen. The rules are strict. No big groups, no loud talking, very limited contact, and most of all, keep the world safe. Before the new prisoner arrived, the staff prepared like a show. Nurses checked lists of medications. Machines hummed. The warden and deputies walked with clipboards. There were forms, long stacks of paper with names and numbers and warnings. The officers used the same words again and again: chain of custody, search protocol, decontaminate, document. Every move had been practiced. Each man in the convoy had a job and had been trained many times. ADX had to be perfect because one small mistake could cause big trouble. Inside, the other inmates watched from behind thick glass. They could not talk to the new man. They could only look. If the new man was allowed to look out, for the people already living there, a new arrival was like a new weather front. It changed the mood. They had their own routines. 1 hour in the little exercise room, a small 3-meal day, some reading in the cell, and sometimes a short visit through glass if a family member had special permission. Many inmates had been at ADX for years. They learned to make small things count. A game with a pen cap, a well-creased sheet, folding a towel just so. Life at ADX was a string of tiny, careful moments. The new prisoner was led to an intake room. His belongings were counted and sealed. He was searched from head to toe and given a flat gray jumpsuit. A nurse checked his pulse and his teeth and asked questions with a quiet voice. The intake officer asked the prisoner to list any special needs. The man gave only a few words. He was calm in the way people can be when they have already been through a long path of choices. As the hours passed, the new inmate was moved to a cell on the 3rd tier. He was shown the narrow bed, the small sink, and the tiny window that showed only a thin strip of sky. He was told the rules. Lights out a set hour. No loud noise. Keep hands visible when the door opens. Always speak slowly. Every rule had been learned by the people who built the place because of lives that had been lost in the past. These rules were part of the safety net. Life in ADX is built around sound and silence. Guards walk with a steady beat. The doors make a certain clank when they open. Meals slide through trays with a small hiss. Everything that moves is watched. But people also learn to live with small comforts. A worn book, the picture of a child taped to the wall, a crossword puzzle, or a radio that can be turned down low. To outsiders, ADX looks cold and empty, but the people inside shape small islands of habit. The new prisoner made small moves at first. He stared at the narrow sky. He touched the metal of the bed. He listened to the rhythm of the hallway. A guard's boot, a key's jingle, the distant hum of the heating system. The first day at ADX is hard because there is too much quiet, and the quiet can make a person think hard. Some inmates write letters. Some pray. Some hum melodies under their breath. The first day is a test of patience. For the staff, the first day was also a test. The officers watch carefully because sometimes prisoners who have been dangerous before try to do something new. They might pass a note, hide a tiny object, or try to harm a guard. The staff's job is to stop that before it begins. They review cameras, and the sergeant checks the radio. The officers watch the windows and move slow. That afternoon, while the new man sat very still on the narrow bed, something unexpected happened. It started with a small sound, a ring, like plastic on metal, a coin rolling or a small drop of water hitting metal. The sound seemed to come from Tier 2, near the laundry. The guards paused and looked at one another. In ADX, every new sound had meaning. The radio crackled. An officer walked fast toward the stairwell, and then stopped. He called for the search team in a low voice. The sound was small, but the building took it seriously. The search team moved like a shadow, checking each cell door and scanning cameras on the wall. Inmates watched. Even the new prisoner lifted his head. The team found nothing at first. They lifted mattresses, looked under sinks, checked vents. They pulled on the metal grate by the laundry room and listened. The sound came again, a faint, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from a cell on Tier 2. When they reached the cell, they saw a man sitting by the door with a pen in his hand. He tapped at the metal lightly, a rhythm like a code. His face was expressionless. He tapped again and again. Tapping has many meanings in prison life. Anger, boredom, a message, or sometimes a signal to another person. The team told him to stop. He did not stop at once. A guard stepped forward and ordered him to keep his hands in sight. The tapping continued, and the team moved to take his pen away. The man laughed quietly as if the tapping was a game. The tapping did not cause a violent scene, but it forced the staff to act. The man was led to a holding room while officers searched the cell. They found small things that were not allowed. A tiny paper clip folded in a certain way. A string of thread. A tiny hidden note under the mattress. This was against the rules. The inmate was written up for a rules violation. The tapping had been a small rebellion and a test of limits. In ADX, small things are large things because they can show intent. The staff wrote reports. But that was not the extreme event the warden feared. The extreme event came later that night. After dinner, a power line outside failed with a soft, sudden pop. The building lost some lights for a moment. The emergency lights flicked on, painting the halls orange and blue. Alarms sounded briefly. For an instant, hundreds of people inside the prison were in low light, with shadows making hallways deeper. The staff had practiced blackouts and knew exactly what to do. But blackouts are dangerous because they create a moment out of time when rules can be tested. Guards switched to flashlights. Keys rattled. Voices were hushed into radio static. At the same time as the lights went, inmates in 3 adjacent cells on Tier 3 began banging loudly on the metal doors. The sound was a thunder of metal on metal. The banging was not a quiet message or a pen on metal. It was a loud demand. The guards on the tier called immediately for backup. 2 officers rushed up the stairwell. The banging was timed and furious. Inmates shouted short words, names, and numbers. The emergency protocol required the officers to retreat to safety until more help arrived. They sealed off the tier and called the control room. Inside the control room, the warden watched the bank of cameras and the radios. He had to make choices in a heartbeat. If he sent too many men up the stairwell and the situation turned violent, officers could be hurt. If he sent too few, inmates might get control of the door panel and create chaos. He called a code over the radio and ordered a soft approach, a tactical team trained for cell disturbances. More men moved in heavy boots and helmets. The tactical team arrived and took positions at the landings. The banging grew louder, and the prisoners' voices were angry and scared in equal measure. The tactical team used shields and spoke through a loudspeaker. They told the inmates to stop banging and asked what they wanted. At first, the inmates shouted and made noise. Then, in the confusion, a voice said a single clear word: lights. The officers realized the inmates were using the blackout as cover. They had a plan to use the darkness to hide small tools or to pass messages across the tier. The tactical team moved carefully, one step at a time. They used the flashlight beams like fingers to search. The officers found more hidden items pressed between walls. They found a small rope made of threaded sheets knotted and tucked behind a vent. They found a folded strip of metal, very thin, hidden under a bowl. These were small things, but dangerous because they could become tools. The men who had tapped earlier were in the center of that search group. The tactical team led them away and counted them again. When the emergency was over and the power returned, the guards made more checks. They found that the prisoners had tried to use the blackout to test the system. It was not a full uprising, but it was dangerous. A plan could have gone further if the blackout had been longer or if more inmates had been ready. The warden wrote a report for higher officials. The new prisoner listened from his little room as the doors closed and the men were led back to their cells. He thought about the banging and the blackout and the way the building had moved. That night, after everything calmed down, the staff reviewed the video footage of the disturbance. They watched the tapping on the camera and saw the face of a man whose eyes were very small and very intent. The footage showed the thin rope pressed into a space where no one had thought to look. They interviewed the inmates who had been moved and asked who had helped them. Some said the tapping man had been the start of it all. Others said they had been bored and had acted on an old plan. No one offered a simple reason. The extreme event, the blackout that became a coordinated attempt to test ADX's limits, was a kind of moment that could make headlines. It was dramatic because ADX is supposed to be nearly impossible to organize in. The blackout had shown a sliver of weakness. The staff knew then that even in a place made to stop danger, danger could still find a small way to make noise. At the very end of the day, as the night grew heavy and the cameras clicked to a slower pace, the new prisoner sat on his narrow bed and turned his face to the small window. He watched the stars and thought of limits. He had come into a place built for silence. He had seen how a small sound could become a big thing. He thought about what it would mean to live locked in a cell where every move is measured. He thought about the men who had punished the tapping and the men who had been moved. The building hummed with the memory of the day. We stop here. When you are ready, I will continue Chapter 2 and follow how the staff and the inmates handle the fallout from the blackout, how relationships inside ADX change, and what new secrets the cameras revealed.